Dear attendees, dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's event in the Open Lecture Series of the EUniWell European Universities program. It is my great pleasure and privilege to introduce the speaker of today's Open Lecture Series, Professor György Purebl. Let me give all of you a brief introduction about him. Dr. György Purebl is a psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and full professor of Semmelweis University. His main interests include suicide prevention, sleep medicine, the interaction between mental and physical disorders, and psychological interventions in general healthcare. He is the leader of the Outpatient Center of Psychosomatic Disorders at Semmelweis University, and he is also the director of the Department of Behavioral Sciences. Besides his clinical work, Dr. Purebl has gained wide experience in prevention and health promotion. He is a leading psychiatric expert in Hungarian Alliance Against Depression and in OSPI Europe, a program for optimizing suicide prevention programs. He was the leader of the work package on taking evidence-based actions against depression and suicide of the EU initiative Joint Action on Mental Health and Well-being. He was the president of the Hungarian Psychiatric Association between 2016 and 2018. Recently, he has been engaged as a work package leader of the European MENTAP program, which aims at improving workplace mental health in the construction, health, and ICT sectors. Now, the title of his presentation that he is about to give to all of us is From Knowledge Transfer to Personal Development, the Changing Needs of Generation Z in Higher Education. Professor Purebl, the floor is now yours.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to thank you for this kind introductory word. It's a great honor and privilege to me to be here and to share some of my ideas about the Generation Z. When I was in my mid-20s, my mother always said that she just doesn't understand me, she doesn't understand my decisions and so on. And I don't want to put myself in her shoes right now, although I am a father of 3 from the generation of Z, and I teach recently many persons from this generation. And right now, briefly, I would like to tell you the more or less specific needs of this generation in higher education and some strategies that how could we tailor our activities in universities to this generation. But first, just a moment, please. But first, can you see the changing of my slides? First, I would like to tell a few words about what is this Generation Z. By definition, these are those young people who were born between 1995 and 2010, but many times they are nicknamed or labeled, and I might say stigmatized sometimes as Facebook generation or internet generation or digitally native generation. I think all of this approach to just saying that, oh, this is the internet generation, this generation, this is an oversimplified and somehow stigmatizing attitudes, because this generation, the members of this generation, is more complex person, with many other aspects from that. First of all, what are the social demographic characteristics of this generation? Of course, these data derived from high and medium income countries, but more or less suitable to Hungary and to Europe and to North America and to some other places in the world, but not worldwide. This generation is the smallest existing age cohort compared to the previous age cohorts, which the members of the Generation Z comes from smaller size families, and they got the highest maternal age. This is just the mere social demographic characteristics. Other characteristics, which are more like psychological or behavioral characteristics, are much more interesting to us, because this is the generation who are the fast thinker generation. They are very instant-minded person with a focus of short-term goals. Social media is probably the most significant communication channel of them. A story about my daughter. I gave a lift to my daughter and to her friend 2 weeks ago, and I drive the car in the front seat, and 3 girls was at the back seat, and they are just sitting there and tapping their smartphones silently. And then just ask my daughter that, why, that you are together, why don't you chat with each other? And the answer of her was that, but father, we are chatting with each other right now. So this also means a very high dependency of technology, and technology somehow shape the identity of the members of this generation. This generation is also lacks some so-called traditional ambitions, long-term career paths, so-called traditional career paths, paths in workplace, in personal career, and etc. Many of them just don't have too much interest on this. But this generation, at the other hand, is very much concerned about environmental issues, about the near future, about climate change, with a very high sense of responsibility about the near future, because this would be, of course, their future, mainly. Other thing is also frequent amongst them, which means many of them lacks interpersonal problem-solving skills, and many of them has a kind of different attitudes toward privacy and intimacy. They can share a lot of information about themselves on the internet, which are considered very intimate information by the previous generation, by us, and sometimes they become victims of this sharing, because internet trolls could ruin their self-esteem, self-perception, and has many negative effects on that because of these sharings about privacy. So these two things, the lack of interpersonal problem-solving skills and different attitudes about privacy, makes them quite vulnerable. But I must note, before I've been accused that I'm again oversimplify this generation, these are frequent phenomena in this generation. But I also have to note that Generation Z is probably the most diverse generation from any other previous age cohort and generation. So individually, they could very much differ from this very general, very general picture about this generation. Other psychological features, as I said before, these are fast-thinking persons with a very practical and very solution-focused thinking. They got superb technical skills and also characterized with a high level of abstract thinking. They got much better attentional skills. They could shift their attention quite frequently. They could pay very much attention to things because the attentional environment for them, because of the huge the excessive time spent on internet, it requires so much attentional skill and needs shared attentional skills, but we do know that there is no shared attention. Sudden attentional shifts are common, and of course higher frequency of attentional problem is also exist amongst them because of this very competitive environment about attention. They got a ability to dealing with high amounts of information, but not in the same way as the previous generation. Previous generations were readers' generation. Textbooks was important. Libraries was important for this generation. This generation Z person many times has lower level of reading skill, literally, than the previous generation. Because why? Because they prefer visuals, not text. The Harry Potter series was an exemption. This generation not find satisfaction in long books. They find satisfaction in movies, visuals, series, many other kind of things, but not long text which needs to be read. This generation many times complain about the experience of loneliness, solitude, or alienation, because they spend too much time on internet, and the internet could be very important for them, but couldn't replace real human relationship. They have a very high motivation for fast satisfaction and fast success. Success is much needed to them, but they also characterize with failure sensitivity and that the kind of avoidant attitudes. They desire a lot of things, but they don't dare to go for it many times because they're so much afraid about failures. And they have higher frequency of conflict solving problems, and therefore they get a higher frequency of emotion regulation problems, which leads to the increase of the frequency of mental disorder in this age group. These numbers, the statistics which you could see here are really very dramatic statistics from the UK. This survey says that within 11 years from 2007 till 2018, there was a 5-fold increase of mental disorder in the university students population in the UK, which is dramatic. The other study, which was about medical students from 43 countries all over the world, demonstrate even more dramatic data. This is a huge study. More than 100,000 persons was involved, and it says that amongst medical students, the frequency of depressive symptoms is 27.2%, and 1/10 of them struggle with suicidal ideation as well. This is really dramatic. Of course, we do know that, and this a little bit modify this picture, that the frequency of mental disorders is generally increasing all over the world and in all age cohorts, but it's still very dramatic because the increase is higher in the young generation. So some researchers might say that 21st century is a century of the mental disorder. We could hope that only the beginning of the 21st century is characterized with mental disorder, and we will do effective things against that. But the situation right now is that which you could see here. The question is, why? Why would it be? Of course, there are many theories. These theories are supported with many data, but and there are models about it, but we still lack those complex and comprehensive model which could answer all the aspects of this increase of mental disorder. One important group of theory emphasized the discrepancy between ambitions and resources. In our cultures right now, many people want to be on the top, wants to be successful, young, beautiful, and rich person, and most of them just couldn't reach this goal. Most of us, I must say, couldn't reach this goal because we don't have resources for that. And sooner or later, it will lead to dissatisfaction, frustration, and anger. This generation that spent many times on virtual world on the internet instead of spending time in the real world, which also leads problems. It leads to limited experience with interpersonal skills and therefore limited experience with emotional regulation. And it has a lot of biological effects as well on psychology. For example, if you spend many times inside the room instead of being in the nature, being outside, just outside, not necessarily in the nature, but on the street, you will lack exercise, you will lack sunshine, which are biologically important for maintaining mental health and well-being. As I said before, there is a continuous ambiguity between desires and the failure of sensitivity, desire for success, and the failure and the fear of failures. This is a very ambiguous, contradictory state of mind, which many times leads to anxiety, low self-esteem, and depression. And many of the members of this generation anticipate a gloomy, unpredictable, and dystopian future, and which also leads to anxiety, hopelessness, and depression. The term climate anxiety, which is a new term in mental health, this is quite frequent in this generation Z. So we have students who just entered to higher education, to the universities, with some kind of sets of psychological features. On one hand, these guys are very practical person, very solution-oriented person with smart and fast thinking, capable of dealing with high amount of information and very advanced expertise in digital technologies. But on the other hand, they are uncertain, sometimes anxious, doubtful, and very emotional, or I must say emotional, unstable person. There are many positive characteristics, psychological characteristics of this generation as well, which the members of this generation are very empathic person. They has a very high motivation to help another, to take responsibility, and they are very sensitive for human problems. And these together, the green one and the blue one, is a very, very good mixture to be excellent professional, to become excellent professional in the future after graduation and after the university. But we have to help them to cope with the red, the uncertainty, anxiety, depression. So on this red set of characteristics need to be overcome. Yes. The question, how could we do that? In education, in higher education. Education is a very complex thing, and if we try to classify the activities in education, we could classify it in different categories. First is teaching. This is very important and very, very traditional thing in education. Also, knowledge transfer and skills training are very important. Mentoring is also very important, but apart from this, this knowledge transfer, skill transfer activities, we do other things in the curriculum of curricula in any kind of universities. And this is the psychological support of our students, the support of their personality development. You know, this year is the late adolescent, early adulthood years are very sensitive years to become an effective and stable person in our later lives. And as a ultimate goal of any universities is value transfer. Transfer those basic values, moral rules, basic tenets of the community, of the culture, which creates that university and which create this higher education model. The first group of activities in university is more like more like about learning, and the second group is more like about growth, personality development. And in this section, this is mentoring. You could very soon see that mentoring is probably the oldest way of effective teaching and education of person. And mentoring, a good mentoring could incorporate any other activities here: teaching, knowledge transfer, skills training, psychological support, etc. Even value transfer as well. So mentoring is a very, very important thing. And we have to do it with a generation with these kind of characteristics. The question is, how could we do that? Teaching is a tricky thing in the 21st century because, you know, knowledge is everywhere. We are just living in an ocean of knowledge, which also means that knowledge can be anywhere. And we many times have to ask ourselves that where is the knowledge? Where is the sufficient, important, useful knowledge in the ocean of knowledge when insignificant, significant, useful, not useful, or even harmful information just come together in an ocean of information. In the 20th century, before the internet era, teaching was a quite simple thing because we got to give sets of information to the patients. University and university communities was specific communities who deal with specific sets of information. But right now, in the area of internet and smartphones, everyone who has a smartphone has almost like the same chance to reach those informations which are really important information for one another sector. But the problem is that how could we find that information in this huge amount of information? Around the millennium, internet was still existed in the millennium, but not social media, or social media was not as abundant as right now. We give more and more and more information to our students because there was a rapid change in this still is a rapid change in technologies, in recent up-to-date knowledge in almost every sectors in the world. So we have to had to give kits of information for our students. Many kits of information are needed to be given to the students. But right now in the 21st century, the best thing we can do is to show, to teach, to give skills to our students how to fish the appropriate information from the oceans of inappropriate information. So we need to give them tools for retrieving the useful information and retrieve it fast. And we have to give them skills for that, not the knowledge itself, which is more important. Which is more important is the ability to distinguish useful and not useful knowledge, and the ways and to know the ways how could we find this information. Teaching has changed. As I said before, this generation is not very motivated for reading long text, huge textbooks. They're more like motivated to see visual aid. This is a term for that. Visual aid could be infographic. Visual aid could be a multimedia online learning programs. There are many of them. It could be even gamified learning programs. But instead of learning books, they are much open to use this kind of materials in teaching. And of course, there is a strong emphasis of small group, interactive, and problem-based teaching in a mentor-centered way, just like you could see this in the picture. Some words about e-learning. E-learning is a buzzword of our university world right now, and it will be for a quite of time, I presume. And after the experiences of the last 2 years with COVID, I must say that Zoom seminars are not e-learning. Zoom seminars is a weak replacement of in-person practices and in-person seminars, and that form in-person is more important and more effective. But apart from this, there is a huge revolution in e-learning, because e-learning is different from Zoom seminars, but this is a huge world with full of effective teaching techniques, digital textbooks with the dominance of infographic, as you could see here. This is from a German language book from our university, and digital training programs with problem-solving tasks are available widely. Even gamified training program, we try to teach important things in a joyful and game way. That's sometimes these programs are called serious games, and not just knowledge transfer could be managed through this way, but also skills training as well through the internet. And multimedia materials is also important. Wide variety wide variety of multimedia materials are available, and this is very good because some students prefer videos, other students prefer texts, some other students prefer infographics, some other students prefer games and problem-based programs. So they could pick up those way of learning which is most suitable for them. Digital libraries, online publishing housing are very, very important, and also mobile applications. One other thing is important from the perspective of this generation Z. It's not enough for a teaching materials to be valuable, to carry recent, up-to-date, important knowledge. It also has to be spectacular. It also has to be very visual, very well designed. I must say very, very sexy, because visuality is almost everything for this generation, and they will make their judgment not just about the content of a material, but also about the design of a material. And we couldn't do anything against that. This is how they really perceive the world, many of them at least. Lectures, just a few words. Probably this is the most annoying picture to us lecturers in a university where students use a smartphone instead of watching us in the lecture hall. But in the other hand, this is the fastest and prompt feedback, positive feedback to us when the student starts to listen and starts to make photographs about our slides in the lecture hall. This is a very imminent, instant positive feedback to us. I'm rather say that this generation, the members of this generation, uses their smartphone all time, everywhere, while they are eating, while they are socializing with each other in person, while they are in the university, while they are doing everything. Even during exercise, they use mobile application, and therefore they use their mobile phone. So I think we have to get used to it, and we have to somehow use this in the lectures. There are some applications which quite available for and it could be good addition to make lectures more interactive, like the Slido or the Kahoot. This is probably the most frequently used application in Hungary, but maybe in other world. As I said before, our world is rapidly changing, and the technologies, the set of knowledge which is needed for a profession is also rapidly changing in all over the sectors, not just in medicine, not just in business, everywhere. And it has a kind of layering effects, just like a dripstone would build up with the dripstones build up from layers. There comes one layer and another layer and another layer, and through decades and centuries, this layering build up a huge column of dripstone. This is which could easily happen in our learning objective in our classes, because of course there always come new layers, the layers of the recent, very up-to-date knowledge, the scientific inventions, the new technologies, and so on. It's of course need to know, and it has a very important place in the learning objectives. Then there comes the practice, all of those things which is needed to do to run a practice. There are other layers, previous layers, which was a couple of years ago, recent and updated knowledge. Right now, after a decade, I'm like, or 5 years in some sectors, this information and also needed to know these are outdated information, but yet significant, because in some practices, sometimes they are followed or so on. But there are layers with the outdated information as well, and there are layers in the many times in learning objectives which informations are mainly belongs to history. And if we just incorporate the new and new layers in our learning objectives in a class, we will create huge materials for the students. It will be much, the materials which needed to know could be easily more than which could a student can take in within 1 year, speaking about a 1 year long class. So we have to be very careful about it, and we have to control the amount of information which is really needed to know by our students in order to avoid this kind of drip stoning. But I said right now, this is the reality. All of us works in that way in all over the universities in the world and in Europe. So yeah, we do all know that. Something about how could we have this generation to cope with the difficulties, the emotional problems, and so on. As I said, this was a previous slide of mine. This is the generation which come to higher education, many positive, with many positive features. This is also positive features, and some features which might be a challenge for that. Of course, if we help them to overcome the challenges, the negative features, and we help them to enhance the positive psychological features like empathy, motivation to help other, sensitivity, etc., we could help them to be a very good professionals. The question is, how could we do that? How could we help our students to go on this way on psychological development, personality development? Mentoring again. Mentoring, probably as I said before, the oldest way of effective teaching and effective help in personality development, and it's not changed. You could see these pictures. This is how mentoring started. This is the son of Odysseus, and when Odysseus went to war, to the Trojan War, asked the other guy here, called Mentor, well, it was the name of his guy, to teach his son Telemachus about the most important thing in life in his absence. That's mentoring. That's how mentoring started, of course, according to the Greek myths and legends. When we're speaking about mentoring, when a good mentor has few numbers of mentees, it means 4 group of activities, the 4 how activities. The first group of activities is the how to do activities, when the mentor teach the practical skills which is needed for a profession. The other sets of how is also important. This is how to deal with sets of skills, which means that the mentor demonstrate how to handle difficult situation in his profession, in his job. Difficult situation with patients when he's a medical professional. Difficult situation with business partners if he or she is a businessman, etc. This is very, very important. The how to do my job in difficult circumstances, difficult interpersonal circumstances. Of course, all of this has a kind of act on us, a kind of burden to us. So the third set of hows is the how to cope set, which when the mentor demonstrates that how he or she himself or herself cope with the emotional burden, the challenges and the difficulties personally, which are work related to him or her. This is also very important to transfer to our students and to our mentees, that how could we balance in workload stress, how could we keep safe and free of anxiety in certain situation, etc. And the fourth set of hows is the how to manage set. This is a kind of fine-tuning. And the first 3, how could the first 3 put into practice together? Yes, but remember, mentoring is the gold standard of education. But mentoring is expensive and requires many well-trained and highly expertized mentors. So many times this has limitations. Mentoring could be worked in another way as well, when senior students mentoring junior lower class students. This is called peer mentoring and peer support. Students more or less in the same age, but with upper classes in the university, help the newcomers to cope with university situation. They introduce them to community life. They give them practical help about the exam, about university life, etc. They could give them some emotional and stress management support as well, because they're experienced in the university scenes. Because the mentors, the peer mentors, are trained person. They are very much aware about alarming mental situation, and they could be first responders for emotional disturbances, and they could help the juniors to find appropriate help when they find themselves in psychologically difficult situation with psychological disturbances. And all of these activities, mentees and mentors together, could build a very good university community, a very coherent and very very interactive university community. Of course, the peer mentors, for the peer mentors, continuous training and supervision are provided. These are the fields of activity of these peer mentors. So what is the benefit of these peer mentoring programs for mentees? First, they're receiving help in socialization when they enter the university after the high school. They're receiving support in many aspects of university life, practical support. They learn stress management from their mentors. They also learn coping strategies. And this is a kind of socialization for them to become a mentor, him or herself, because many of the former mentees become in upper classes become mentor. What is the benefit for the mentors? They learn the mentoring, they learn how to be a mentor, how to practice mentoring with other people. This is a very important aspect of life, because almost all person in a certain period of his personal career find himself in a position that he have to mentor other person. In a business unit, in a hospital, always come fresh colleagues, newcomers, young interns, and they need mentoring. So it's a very important skill to us to learn some mentoring skill, because that's sooner or later, if we are enough successful, this will be part of our job everywhere. But these guys also practice support to other people. They have real life experiences about mentoring and supporting, and this whole the contribution in peer mentoring help them to build their self-esteem and self-confidence. Which is very good for them. Of course, there are other ways to give psychological support and to support personality development for our students. And this other important form is the personal skills group training programs for students. In many universities, these training programs is available. Art of learning programs, which is about to learn effective learning skills. Learning is a skill which need to be learned, of course, but there are stress management programs, which when students learn how to deal with stress, how to deal with conflicts in a conflict management programs. There are programs for resilience and burnout prevention, which is very important, not just in medicine, but in all sectors. We don't know right now that burnout is a phenomenon which is present in every sectors, not just in medicine, not just in teaching and education. Burnout is in everywhere, and not just in the multi companies, but it also could be found in small and medium enterprises as well, independently from firm structure and firm size. it's a problem. It's a problem of our culture. And there are also are available personal development groups in many universities. This is group training, which has the students to develop a kind of self-awareness. They will know their strength. They will know the weaknesses. They will learn how they could keep weaknesses. How could they cope with the weaknesses? How could they develop skills against the weaknesses? This is very, very valuable, because it's these are those soft skills in life which is really important to learn, and those persons who learn these soft skills effectively and consciously, they could become more effective person in their later life. And student counseling is also available in many universities, and it also has an important role in the universities. Maybe you remember the slides about the frequency of mental disorders in universities in the UK and in the medical universities, which was a JAMA study. Student counseling and student psychological support is also important. This is a individual and sometimes group-based settings, and the emphasis in this counseling is prevention of mental disorders, or sometimes it is early treatment of mental disorder in early stages in order to prevent further consequences. And this is very important to do it in a non-stigmatizing way. Students counseling centers are not psychiatric care, so they are much less stigma is connected with these places. These acts somehow on the border of the healthcare system. Of course, if someone has a more serious mental health problem, they will refer to healthcare system. But sub-threshold clinical problem could be managed very easily in this student counseling model. And these student counseling centers help the student to prevent mental disorders in the universities, and I must say in the future as well. So just at the end of my lectures, because I'm running out of time, we could see that education is about teaching, knowledge transfer, and skills training in one hand, psychological support of personal development and value transfer in the other hand, and mentoring is the common section of these two group of activities, because good mentoring is incorporate everything. The first group of activities is more like about learning, and the other is more like about growth and personality development. And right, we do know what are those strategies which are effective strategies for fulfilling these activities in the universities, and which activities are tailored to the needs of the generation Z. Nowadays, if you would like to tailor these activities to the generation Z, we have to use more visuals. We need to use more skills training, sometimes on a problem-based way, or even sometimes on a gamified way in teaching. We need to exploit all the kind of digital resources which we could, including videos, movies, infographics, etc. And in the other hand, members of the Generation Z also need probably a little bit more of support from this other side of activities, like peer mentoring programs, some kind of support for personality development and coping with psychological difficulties, probably with the student counseling center. This is very important in this generation. And the first set of activities help the students to become professionals with exceptional skills and exceptional professional knowledge. And the other group of activities help the students being prepared to endure all the challenges and difficulties which is part of every profession and which is part of the life in the future. So That's what I would like to share with you right now. So thank you very much for your attention. And this is my last slide. And I'm very much open to discuss all of these issues with questions and with comments. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this wonderful lecture, Professor Purebl. The floor is now open for discussion. I do not see any question that may have arrived through the chat, but I myself, just by way of initiating discussion, I have actually several questions based mainly on the thought-provoking issues that you touched upon in your talk. So my first question relates, you mentioned when you described the Generation Z, the properties, which marks a very different population. I myself have Generation Z children or child myself. You mentioned the capability of abstract thinking. Now, I would argue with that a little bit, because isn't there, or couldn't there be a misconception about what we refer to abstract thinking? Just think of the following. My experience as a teacher is that, like, mathematics and theoretical physical thinking is very poor in this generation. Even though a certain type of abstraction, I agree, is rather strong. In my view, one of the strongest level of, or highest level of abstraction lies in mathematics. So, there's like a self-contradiction in claiming that this generation is very abstract thinker, whereas they lack mathematical skills. So what's your opinion on that?
As I said before, and I always have to emphasize that this generation is very diverse. So there is guys who are lack of mathematical thinking, but the other is yes. And I think this kind of abstraction, mathematical abstraction, could be one form of abstraction. Although this is although I agree that this is the most subtle and most precise form of abstraction. But if you see that the sets of mathematical information which is required for the high school final right now compared to 2 decades ago per se, I think the standards is higher right now, which I think somehow means that because the standards are higher in the final mathematics graduation exam after the high school, maybe this is higher because they could be higher, because this generation could, most of the members of this generation could cope with these higher standards of final examination. But I don't know, I'm not a mathematician and not even a physician, so it's your field that you could see better than me. Yeah.
Anyway, I think I got the point. Well, so there are different ways of approaching abstraction. Yes. So my second question is about what you mentioned, the sensitivity to current issues and the sense of responsibility. I buy that. I agree with that. I accept that. But by way of example, you mentioned the sensitivity towards climate change and environment. I'm just wondering whether is this truly a sign of the sense of responsibility, or could this fact be manipulated? In other words, yes. You mentioned that the information flood that precipitates on this generation is a very even and homogeneous information flood, which doesn't differentiate. So the more information, the higher number of events and news will generate a bias by itself. So I think they will. I mean, this generation might just click on the most prominent, overemphasized set of information, And it doesn't really mean the sense of responsibility in that sense. What do you think?
Absolutely agree. I think the basis that this generation is very sensitive and very responsible. And that's why, because of this high sense of responsibility, they could be easily manipulated because of issues, with issues which raise from one side and the other side and the third side. But the basis that they are sensible, or they are sensitive, and they would like to take responsibility, that's essential. And therefore they are very easy to manipulate it, because they has these positive attitudes toward the future.
Yeah, great. My third question relates to this prior one about our role as teachers in sorting out in between this flood of information. So would you agree with the following statement, that our prime responsibility as teachers is to assign significance, a sense of reality and a sense of truthfulness, like a weighting factor to different sets of information. So we have to, have to differentiate quality-wise in this huge amount of information.
Absolutely agree. Teaching is like a family, and in some sort of way, family is not a democratic institution, because if there is a family and there is 3 children and 2 adults, and what will be the Sunday lunch will be decided with pure voting. In every Sunday there will be ice cream with because the two parents is in minority, and if 3 or 4 children in the family and they all vote for having ice cream for the Sunday lunch, that will be ice cream. So this is also, we also as teacher feel a kind of pressure from the student that according their point of view, what is important and what is not important in the curriculums and the learning objective of each subject and each classes. But they could saying their opinion, but we the teachers has the responsibility to determine the learning objective, and it shouldn't based on the students' wish list, but also it have to be based on the reality, on what's happening in our sectors, in our field of science, in our field of business, and because we are in the position to decide which is important and which is not. So I think we have to be very cautious about the sets of information and the collection of information which is given to the students, but we teachers alone have to determine this kind of learning objectives.
Great. So to short,
this was an answer for your question.
I think so. Yes. So the point that you made, if I can just summarize it, is that
in other words, I mean this because in university is not a democratic institution, in a sense that not just students determine what they would like to learn in a university, what amounts of information which is needed from them for life, because they don't know it yet, because they are not expert yet in their fields.
Well, if I may,
there are some universities, some distant part of the world, and you could learn vampirology on surfing or anything like that, but we're not working in that kind of universities.
Yeah, if I may phrase it in the following way. So the measure of truth, or the criterion of truth, yes, is not a democratic vote, particularly not in sciences, not in natural sciences particularly, but there are different measures of that, and that's the foundation, how we would evaluate and sort out between information.
Yeah.
Now, there was a comment that arrived in the chat box. So let me just read you that. At Leiden University, we are using peer mentoring, tutoring, as a means to support students, mainly starting students, on bachelor and master's level. At some institutes, we see that the mentoring currently is not as effective as we wished it would be. Students either don't show up, although they register, or where mentoring is mandatory, students sit through the sessions without actively participating. What could be done about this? Also, on another note, some students told me that they think mentoring is not a sexy concept and they feel like they are kids, again, who don't know anything about life.
Yeah.
What would you comment?
We have the same experiences right here in the Semmelweis University. We also have a peer mentoring programs, and that has a almost, not all, but many students, many mentees that have the same career, that first they are very much engaged in mentoring and they disappear. And they said, oh, that we are an adult, we are enough strong to do our thing alone without assistance and help of others and so on. And I think this is a transient state of their minds, and which is a good outcome of the mentoring in the first part of their curriculum. Sooner or later, they will return to their mentors. This is our experience, that after a couple of years, when the students facing with new difficulties, facing with new problems, or experience that those problems which they thought that they could manage it, they just couldn't manage it, they return to their mentors. But mentoring is not a continuous activity. It's continuous, but in a kind of hectic way. The students somehow become more distant from the mentors and then get back to their mentors and become distant again, but it's very similar when an adolescent person relates to their family member, relates to their parents, because sometimes they need to experience things themselves, but if they need support, they return and ask support. So I think that's natural. And of course, in certain state of mind, they say, oh, I'm over mentoring. I don't need mentoring anymore because this is not sexy for me because I'm enough old and enough strong. But after a while, he will face new problem. He or she will face new problem, new difficulties, and then he or she will return to the mentoring. If someone at the end of mentoring process feels that I am the one who do the things alone and I'm capable for manage myself, this is the best way. If someone at the end of the mentoring says that without my mentors, I couldn't do anything, this means that mentoring is not working in a good way. Mentors have to, the success of a mentor is when he experiences the fact that there is no need to him or her anymore.
Yes.
That's the ultimate success of mentoring.
Yes, so there's a comment here. Again, by Alexander Blank, she mentioned that that's the point with peer tutoring. They cannot return to their mentors because they will be gone and finished with studying. So their contact persons are gone. Who are the mentors at Semmelweis?
At Semmelweis University, the upper class students are the mentors, and yes, they are the part. Many times we know that if there is an exceptionally good connection between the mentor and the mentee, it could continue after the graduation of the mentor, and the mentor as a resident and a medical doctor could many times being connected with their mentees. Many times it's a kind of friendship. But I think it's the personal aspects of mentee-mentor relationship is very, very important. Yes, but which is more important, that students could connect to the mentoring as an institution, and they think that if they need help, they go to the mentoring program, and if their previous mentor is gone because already graduated, that would be a sense of them to find a new mentor. So I would like to say that very good mentor-mentee relationship is very good, but the enough good relationship is enough. If this relationship is too good, it will be endanger the whole process of mentoring, because after the mentor is gone, the mentee couldn't have in the position to find a new mentor, not because there are no new mentors, but he emotionally attached to the other one, to the first one, the previous one. Am I clear? I don't know.
I think so. If I may add,
answer for your question.
Then add a note on this because just it was a specific question, who are the mentors? I should tell you that, Alexandra, that there are actually at least two levels of mentoring. One is what Dr. Purebl is referring to, is the graduate level, or I should say the student-based
mentoring.
Peer mentoring, and that indeed carries its problems. But there is the talent program mentoring as well, in which the instructors and teachers, often professors, are the mentors, and that's again a type of mentoring, but that's for a select a group of people. Now our time is pretty much up, and actually, if I may just conclude with maybe a comment on this mentoring issue, and because it's very important to me personally as well as a teacher, and I am serving as a mentor in the talent program as well. I think it's a key issue that we take our mentees seriously as adults. I mean, this acceptance, and the key word I think is acceptance. Wherever, as parents, as teachers, students, accepting our students, as adults, is very important, because that sets the stage for a successful communication. That's what I experienced myself, but this is a fantastic area for explosive, inventions. And I think Professor Purebl gave truly a remarkable overview of what's going on in this area at Semmelweis University. And with that, I really, truly thank Professor Purebl for this outstanding talk. And with this, our lecture series will be carried on. So thank you very much for attending, and I wish you a very nice evening and a very nice rest of the semester. Thank you very much again. Bye-bye.